Let's stand as we hear the words of Jesus today from an Epiphany story, the Gospel according to St. John, beginning with the first verse. On the third day, a wedding took place in Cana in Galilee. Jesus' mother was there, and Jesus and his disciples had also been invited to the wedding. When the wine was gone, Jesus' mother said to him, "They have no more wine." Jesus replied, "Woman, why do you involve me? My hour has not yet come." His mother said to the servants, "Do whatever he tells you." Nearby stood 6 stone water jars, the kind used by the Jews for ceremonial washing, each holding from 20 to 30 gallons. Jesus said to the servants, "Fill the jars with water." So they filled them to the brim. Then Jesus told them, "Now draw some out and take it to the master of the banquet." They did so, and the master of the banquet tasted the water that had been turned into wine. He did not realize where it had come from, though the servants who had drawn the water knew. Then he called the bridegroom aside and said, "Everyone brings out the choice wine first, and then the cheaper wine, after the guests have had too much to drink. But you have saved the best till now." What Jesus did here in Cana of Galilee was the first of the signs through which he revealed his glory, and his disciples believed in him. Word of God, word of life. You may be seated. So the police officer pulled over a car for speeding, and as he walked up to the driver, he recognized it was one of the local pastors. He sniffed the air a little bit and said, "Pastor, have you been drinking?" And the pastor said, "Just water, officer." And the officer said, "Well, then why do I smell wine?" And the pastor said, "Good Lord, he's done it again." Water into wine. It is one of the 3 great Epiphany passages of the church. I mentioned a couple of Sundays ago that about 100 years before the church ever thought about celebrating Christmas, they celebrated Epiphany, the 3 great festivals, Epiphany, Easter, and Pentecost. The word Epiphany means the revealing of the manifestation of the glory of God, or John will use the word signs that show the glory of God. And so the Eastern Church on the day of Epiphany had 3 great stories. The Magi, those old magicians from the East coming to adore the Christ child, the baptism of Jesus, and then thirdly, Jesus turning the water into wine at Cana in Galilee, the first of his miracles according to the Gospel of John. This year we get to read all of those passages. It's rare that we get to read all of those passages on a Sunday, and today we come to the third one, the water into wine. Last week there was a baptism. This week there's a wedding. Last week was about water. This week is about wine. And all of it comes together to reveal or manifest the glory of God, specifically in Jesus Christ. But before you can see any glory in Cana, you first have to see a great need. The mother of Jesus, and by the way, John never tells us her name. We know from the other Gospels her name was Mary. So Mary, the mother of Jesus, comes to Jesus at the wedding, takes him aside and says, "They have no more wine." Now you need to know that in those days, weddings lasted 7 days. You think you stay up till 2 a.m. at a wedding reception and that's a big deal? No. In those days, it was 7 days that they would celebrate. It began with the groomsmen going to the house of the bride, and they would escort her to the house of the groom. There would be a ceremony. And then the father would take his daughter around throughout the village. They'd knock at every door. Everybody had a chance to congratulate this new bride. And then the people would gather at the house for 7 days to eat and drink and enjoy the joy. Occasionally they'd slip back off to work, and then they would come right back to the party again. And the rules of Mideastern hospitality were clear and unbending. You never run out of food, and you never run out of wine. If you did, people would remember that for decades. So that was the rule. And so you know now why Mary is urgent when she comes to Jesus and says, they have no more wine. Have you ever been in Cana and the wine has run out? Have you ever been in some kind of Cana land and you have run out of wine? We say it in different ways. They have no money. She has no cure for the disease. He has no friends. She has no strength. I've got no heart left. Or thinking of tonight's eclipse. A total eclipse of the heart. I've had a total eclipse of the heart. Have you been there? Have sometimes you felt, I am stretched so thin, like butter spread over too much bread. I have no more wine. You and I know Mary's line. We've been there, and we know people we love perhaps that are there right now. It's when we feel helpless, or when we feel that God is a million miles away. When we've got nothing to offer, or when there is nothing that we are able to receive. When faith is futile and life is empty, we have no more, and you can fill in the blank because you know the word that needs to go in that blank. But those are not just words of despair. Those are words of hope, words of turning, naming the trouble, speaking the hurt, as we've said several times, can be part of the healing. And Mary knows to whom she should go. Mary knows the right person to tell, and it is Jesus. She's raised him the last 30 years. She remembers that night of the birth where Luke tells us that she treasured all those things and she pondered them in her heart. And now that pondering of her heart leads her to tell Jesus something that is very urgent. Because she knows who Jesus is. She is certain of his ability and of his generosity. Plus, Jesus is already there. Don't miss that point. Jesus is already there. In the place of your need, Jesus is already there. He has gone ahead of you to that place. And so Mary tells the right person, and she tells him this simple, urgent truth. They have no more wine. And from Mary, we learn something. We learn to insist against all odds. We learn to insist upon the power of telling God the truth in prayer. And of course, in this case, Mary has to get persistent. Pushy is the word I'm trying not to use today. I wouldn't want to say that word about the Blessed Mary, but she seems pushy if I were going to say that out loud. That's what it is. She is persistent, let's say. She says to Jesus They have no more wine. And basically, Jesus responds, yes, and so I'm not the caterer. They obviously haven't planned well. Woman, my hour has not come. Did you ever try telling your mother that when she asks you to do something? Woman, my hour has not come. Kids, you might try that sometime. See how that goes. We don't know why Jesus said it and why he said it that way. He used the very formal, polite but formal word woman instead of what you would usually use with your mother, which would be mother. Mother, my hour has not come. He knows, of course, that the countdown to crucifixion is going to begin as soon as people realize who he really is, his real identity. Maybe he's not ready to start that clock ticking by doing a miracle because that's going to put his identity out there. And once that clock starts ticking, it's not going to stop until he gets to the cross. Or maybe he thinks that wine should not be his first miracle. With all the great need in the world, it seems a little frivolous to make more wine. Or maybe he's having fun with his friends and doesn't want to be interrupted. Or maybe there's some kind of mysterious timeline known only to Jesus and his Father who is in heaven. Whatever the case is, Mary's not going to cave. Mary isn't caving in on this one. She gives him the mom look. She never says a word, but she gives him the mom look. You know the look. It's a look that says, I don't care about your hour. There is a big problem, and it's right here, right now. So change your plans and hasten your hour. You know, that kind of look that says all that, just a mom look. And then Mary turns to the servants and says, it's okay. He's going to do what I say. So you just do whatever it is that he tells you to do. She doesn't know the details. She's not the wedding planner, doesn't know the plan. She simply trusts Jesus. She hands him the trouble, and she trusts that Jesus is going to do something. And Jesus does it. The water into wine, and with that, the start of the ticking of the cross clock. Jesus tells the servants to fill the jars with water. When you read through John's gospel, you'll notice often Jesus doesn't do a miracle alone. He involves other people. So he doesn't just fill up those empty jars with wine, but he tells the servants, go and bring water from the well. That will take a little while, but bring water from the well and fill those jars with water. And then the wedding planner comes over to take a taste. And the wedding planner realizes, whoa, we have more wine. And it's better than the first batch. In fact, this is the best wine you could possibly get. Not only that, there's so much of it. 150 gallons. That's like bringing in 1,000 wine bottles for the party. It's life for that party. There's no end in sight for that banquet. The wine goes on forever and the party never ends. And Jesus shows us God. The glory of God, and specifically, this is a showing, a shining of the abundance of God, the absolute extravagance of God. Sometimes we get it in our head that there's not enough. There's not enough in life of whatever, joy, happiness, fullness of living, acceptance. And we assume, wrongly, but we do assume that there's a shortage for all the people in the world and a shortage for us personally or for our families. And so we begin to ask the scarcity questions. Will I have enough? Are we running out? Am I rich enough, safe enough, good enough? And Jesus does not accept that pessimism of scarcity. For Jesus, the time has come, and it is time to drink the best wine. It's a time of grace. Cana grace. Heard someone use that phrase one time. Cana grace, a grace that is full and a grace that is abundant. And Jesus, who changed water to wine, in the days ahead will change wine into his blood, his life given for us. And when his hour does come, that is an hour in which he is lifted upon the cross. And in the Gospel of John, John emphasizes the victory of the cross, which is why in the early days of the church, they called Good Friday the day of the victory of the cross. It's a victory day, the victory over sin, death, and the power of the devil. And on the third day, did you notice that this passage begins with the words, on the third day? On the third day, there was a wedding in Cana. John put that little detail in. He was writing about 60, 70 years after the time of Jesus. He put that little detail in because he knew when people heard that word, on the third day, they were going to think of another third day. He wants this scene of Cana in Galilee to be connected with that last scene of another third day. On the third day, he rose again from the dead, we say, bringing life and salvation. And the wine that Jesus still serves to this day is forgiveness and life and salvation and raising. Back in the 4th century, there was a man who decided to calculate the exact amount of water that was turned into wine. And he took his estimate to St. Jerome, who was a great teacher and preacher of the church. And he asked Jerome if the guests at Cana had drunk all of the wine before they finally went home. And Jerome said, no, we are still drinking of it. My friend, we are still drinking of that wine. Cana grace, Calvary grace, Easter grace, it's all the same drink. It's all the same wine. And it is abundant. Abundant not only for that heavenly banquet in the age to come, but also abundant now. Bishop Desmond Tutu was tortured and beaten for his faith. And yet he still kept this outlook of what God is doing in the world. And I want to borrow his words and close with these words as words that show what the wine is. The wine that Jesus is still pouring and pouring into this world. Goodness that is stronger than evil. Love that is stronger than hate. Light that is stronger than darkness. Life that is stronger than death. And victory that is ours through Christ who loves us. Loves you. Loves me, loves us, loves this whole weary world with a love that is unfailing. Amen.
We hope you have been blessed by this presentation from Bethany Lutheran Church in Fredericksburg. We invite you to worship with us on Sunday mornings at 8, 10:25, or 10:30 a.m. Please like, share, and subscribe this video so that you can help spread the good news of Jesus Christ.